How's it going? Today we're going to be doing a general inspection on this 2019 Triumph Street Scrambler. All the bikes will have a little tag right here. So make sure that you write the name as well as the label right here on your general inspection sheet. So the homie's name is Brad. We're going to do Brad and then T Scrambler. Bam. Tech. That's your name. My name's Nico Carrión.
There you go.
Brake pads, front and rear. Let's go check them out. So, we're looking for a decent sized thickness. Let's see if we can take a peek inside of here. You can't really see in there. Maybe from the back end. Should we get a flashlight of some sort? I'll use my phone. So, we're looking for this ceramic kind of stuff right here. This is looking fairly low, probably around 45%-ish. I always like to say, whenever I see a brake pad of that size, I always like to say, replace it after this season. So, we're gonna put 45% on the front, and then we're gonna do the same thing for the back. Sometimes you will have 2 rotors and 2 calipers on your front tires, so make sure that you're checking both of them. They should evenly be the same amount because they should be replaced at the same time, but sometimes you'll find a seized caliper where one isn't closing and the other one's closing too much, so keep an eye out for that too. On the back end right here, we're going to take a peek at the caliper. Damn! We gotta really get up in there. That's not that bad. What is that, like 60%?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Alright. We're looking at 60% on the rear. Over time, you'll kind of get a good idea of what a brake pad should look like. It's really not that difficult. If you have any questions, you can always Google proper brake pad size, or you can just look on the wall. We have all of the brake pads right there. So good there. Next, we're gonna check brake disc thickness. So we're gonna go right here, and this is our brake disc right here. All right, and we want to see how thick it is because over time it wears down because the brake pads are putting friction against it. So I just kind of like to give it a little fondle. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes there'll be a ridge on the end. You can feel that. As long as it doesn't look too thin, it should be good. This is a good thickness.
Smooth and thick.
Front is looking good too. As you can see, I'm not sure what you can see with the camera, but there's a tiny little bit of a ridge that goes down at an angle. It's not a perfectly flat thing. There's a tiny little ridge just at the end that goes down that way. So that one's good too. So we're gonna go 85 on either one. Now, to tighten your brake calipers right here, you're gonna need a torque wrench. So, grab a torque wrench. This is Jeremy's box. Jeremy has a torque wrench right here, second drawer down. This thing's like $600. Don't fucking drop this shit.
Don't drop it.
Next. This looks, what size is this? That's not 14. Is it a 14?
How would we look up torque specs?
How would we look up torque specs? Well, you can check online. I like to use Google. Google sometimes has the answer. If not, Reddit, Thumper Talk, or if it's Triumph, you can also call Triumph and see if they'll give you the torque specs. Or we also have a website. Didn't you just start doing the website?
Shop Manager Pro.
Shop Manager Pro, yeah. I think we're gonna have to re-download that shit because Jeremy didn't pay for it. But Shop Manager Pro. All right, found the torque spec. It is 35 Newton meters. So we're gonna go click, 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 click to 35 right here. Make sure that you're in the correct unit. There's different types of units. There's kgcm, DNM, foot-pounds, and you have inches per pound, and make sure that you're in Newton meters. So we're gonna put that down on, and we're gonna take a peek right here. As soon as it turns green, nice. So as you can see, they were a little loose. So it's always good to tighten your brake calipers. Once you've torqued your caliper down to spec, you are going to go grab a paint marker from either the maroon box, or there's always one in Santino's box, top left corner. Just make sure you put it back whenever you use it, and you're going to do this. to your caliper bolts. A nice straight little line on both bolts, just so you can see if they get loose on the trail, on the road, whatever it may be. An extra safety feature that's definitely worth doing. Now that we have torqued the calipers to spec, we're going to put the amount of Newton meters that we torqued them to, 35 Newton meters. The rear was built into the axle, so we did not have to tighten the rear. Now we're going to check brake fluid for the front and the rear. Let's take a peek right over here. We're going to stand the bike up straight, make sure that it's sitting up straight, and you're going to take a peek at the front reservoir as well as the rear. The front reservoir should always have a little bit of air to mess around with. This is a little high, but you can see there's just a small amount of bubbles in there, you know? We would originally want more bubbles in here, more space. This looks like it was a little bit overfilled.
It's looking kind of dark too.
Yeah, it's looking a little bit dark too. So I'm gonna recommend that we do a brake flush and adjust the correct level for the pads, as well as probably for the rear. All right, now we're gonna check for the throttle cable. This is pretty simple. I'm just gonna give it a quick little blip. If it snaps back into place and there's no reverse play back there, then it's a good throttle cable. You do not want your throttle cable to be sticky. If it's sticky and it gets stuck right here and doesn't snap back, it's a major hazard. What you can do is adjust where the line is going. Sometimes, like by bending the line, it makes it stick. You can also lube inside of here, or you can lube inside of your throttle cable with some PJ lube. Make sure you're using the right correct lube though for this.
What's our next step, Nico?
Now we're going to be checking for correct tire pressure. You want to come on over here? We're going to look on the sidewall and we're going to see what PSI this tire recommends. I believe that this is saying max 42 PSI cold. So I like to put in 38. I don't know if I see it in there. I was just kind of giving it a guess.
Well, it's gonna be very like small lettering. Tell you specifications.
Yeah, 42 PSI was right here. So I like to put 38, just because maximum, you don't want to be putting the max. Stick it in here. Oh wow, we were at 15 PSI.
15.
Yeah, let's turn that up. Go ahead and do it. You can use this button right here to inflate it, or this to deflate it if you went just a bit over. Alright, now we are at the rear tire, and we're going to find the valve, which is right here. We're going to hop in here. It's always good to check if the tires are in the correct rotation as well. Sometimes people get their tires put on and they put them on backwards, so I always like to double check. A good way to do that is by seeing if there's an arrow anywhere on the tire. I know there's one on the front right here. Look, so see how this says rotation? Right there?
Yep.
That means that the tire is spinning this way. You know what I'm saying? So this is good. The rear tire looks to be, it gets in the correct rotation as well. So, fill this rear tire as well up to 38. This was at 34, so not too bad. 38, make sure you put the valve cap back on. You don't lose, if you lose it, we have like 500 of them.
And why don't we inflate all the way to 42?
Because air expands when it's in the heat. So let's say you leave your bike out in a hot day and you filled it max to 42 PSI on a cold day, that air will expand and turn into like 46, 47 PSI. And that gets really sketchy sometimes, you know? You'll have uneven wear on your tires. It can cause the tires to not rotate properly. It can cause you to have less traction. A whole bunch of different scenarios that could happen. Now we are going to look at tire date codes. You're looking for 4 numbers in a little oval sort of shape. It's usually on the left side of tires. Right here it says 2718. That means that this tire was made in the 27th week of 2018. This tire was made, I believe this one might be on the right side. This one was made in the 24th week of 2018. Usually tires that are anywhere less than 5 years old are good. But a way to check tire quality is if it has any cracks, that means it's dry rotting. That's not good. If there's any like discoloration, or it looks like the tire is like has like divots being pulled out of it and it's like super like crusty, that's also a good sign that it's time to change your tires. These two tires seem to be in fairly good shape. There's no signs of aging in here. There's no like wrinkles, you know what I'm saying? No cracks, especially in these little seams right here. This is where they're gonna pop up first. The cracks are gonna pop in like right around here, around those certain areas. So these tires look good.
How's the tread?
The tread was pretty good. We're looking at around 60% of the front. You can see that we still have some sort of nipples right here, which is a good sign. But that could also mean that the rider is just a shit rider and he doesn't lean the bike. But this tire has at least 1 more season in it. And this rear tire has around 1 to 2 more seasons in it, depending on how hard they ride.
That's some pretty good thickness.
It is a pretty good thickness right there. Fucking loud as hell. Alright. Alright, the last thing we checked was tire wear as well as the tire day code. Now we're going to check for correct and proper wheel bearings. What I like to do is I just straighten it up, hold on to the handlebar, and just give it like a one hold back and forth, push, like you're pushing away and also towards, and the wheel should not have any play. It should not make any sound. It should be snug in between it. If there's any play, that means that your wheel bearings are going out. The way to check it for the rear, I like grabbing some of that and pushing against it and giving it a nice pull. This is fine, and also you can tell if a wheel bearing is going out when you ride it. It's a very noticeable thing. It's like a sound. It won't rotate properly. It'll be pretty evident. These wheel bearings look fairly good. There's nothing really to be worried about, as well as this bike is very low miles. So I'd say they're pretty good. Next, we're gonna go over here to our chain and sprockets. This chain is definitely looking a little rusty, corroded. I believe this white stuff is called calcium buildup, if I'm not mistaken. And that's just from like stuff on the road, getting on there and not drying properly, there not being enough wax on there. And this is a pretty big hazard because over time, this corrosion can cause these links to snap. And I've seen videos where the chain will go into somebody's leg and rip their whole leg off. I've seen videos where it goes into the engine casing and just destroys the engine casing. So yeah, it's always good to maintain your chain as well as adjust the chain slack. This is a tiny bit loose, I'd say, like just a tiny bit loose, but he definitely needs a new chain. So I'm gonna write down a new chain at the bottom. And the sprockets have some life on them. They're not too thin. The teeth are fairly wide. So I'd say those are good. And to check the front sprocket, we'll have to remove this with 2 8mm, pull this off, and we'll be able to see that over there.
Because that's the front sprocket.
That is a front sprocket, yes. And usually when you've replaced the rear sprocket, it's always good to replace the front sprocket too. It's kind of a good pair, because you might as well have it both knocked out at the same time. Next, we're checking the engine oil level. And we'll do that by hopping onto the right side of this case. And we're gonna look for this little viewport right here. This little viewport is clear and you'll be able to see the engine oil level inside of there. When reading it, make sure that the bike is standing upright and it's had time to sit so that all the fluid has time to fall down to the bottom. Now that the bike is upright, Santino, you'll give me a, how's it looking? Is that good or bad?
We're looking right in the middle.
All right, sweet. Next, you gotta check steering head bearings. And that's all right in here, under here, and under here. These are your steering head bearings. You'll be able to tell if the steering head bearings are going out if you move the handlebar back and forth and it clicks. It feels like it clicks into place. Like if it clicks all of a sudden right there in the center, that means that the steering head bearing is notched and it's old. That's a good way to tell that your bearings are going out. You should always be able to freely move your handlebar from the left to the right without any sort of clicks or resistance in between. And you should never be able to hear any sort of play or have any sort of movement back and forth, as well as front and back. This feels really snug, so these steering head bearings are good. Next, we are going to check and see how the battery's health is. We're going to grab a voltmeter. We're going to put it to the 20 volt, which is right here. Make sure it's right here and not on this side. This will not read the correct amount. You need to have it right there. It works as 20. And then we're going to grab the prongs. Make sure that your prongs are pushed in all the way, by the way. Sometimes they come out and they don't read properly, so make sure these prongs are always pushed in. And then we are going to grab the negative terminal, which is the black, and put it onto the negative terminal of the battery. And then we're going to grab the positive terminal, which is the red, and we're going to put it on the red. And we're going to read what it says right here. So see how it's saying 10.61 volts? This is nowhere close to the right amount of voltage that we need to turn this bike over. So
What do we need?
we need a new battery. That is the first thing I would do for sure. First thing I would do actually before that is charge it. And if you charge it and it works for like a 30-minute test ride, and you turn the bike off and you turn it back on and it's okay, then that's great. But in this case, we charged it and the battery got all the way to 14 volts, but it still did not want to turn the bike over. So we need a new battery. This battery, even though it reads 14 volts, it is faulty. So we need the new one.
How do we know it's faulty?
Well, we jump-started it, and when we had the external battery attached to this battery, and we turned the bike over, it turned over, ran totally fine. But as soon as we released the jumper cables and we turned the bike off and tried to start it again without the jumper cables, it wouldn't turn over. So we know that the external battery is helping the source, and it's bypassing this battery, which means that that battery is the problem.
Gotcha. And what kind of volts are we looking for ideally?
When you have a new battery at full charge, you want around 13.5 volts. Nothing, even if it's like 11.98 volts, that's still not enough. If it's like 12.2 volts, that's really low. You need at least like 12.7, 12.8 to 13.5. I'd say is a good range in a sense, you know?
Cool.
Next, we're going to check and see if this bike is charging. This bike in particular cannot be checked to see if it's charging because of the fact that the bike does not run because the battery is dead. But I'm going to show you how to do that anyways. We're going to grab our voltmeter right here. As always, make sure these are plugged in. Put it to 20 volts, turn it on, negative, on negative, and positive, on positive, right here. And then if the bike were running, you would read the starting voltage, which in this case is 10.66, and then you would start the bike, and if the voltage is greater than what it was previously at standing voltage, then that means that your bike is charging correctly. If it is not charging, there's a few things that it could be. It could be your rectifier, which is like an alternator for a bike, or it could be your ICU, which is a problem that Santino had on his Triumph right here. But yeah, or it could also be a faulty battery as well. So yeah, those are the three kind of main things that I would check for sure. Next, we're gonna see if all of our lights work. So we're gonna make sure the bike is on, and we are gonna do right turn signal first, which is right there. This is working, and we're gonna check the back as well, and then we'll do the left turn signal. How's that looking back there?
Looking good.
Left turn signal up here is looking good too.
Sweet.
Our passing light, which is right here, which should affect the main headlight, which is great. And I believe we have one more out. Oh yeah, that's the turn signal off. These are different modes. No. And we have hazard lights right here. Hazards work on the front, hazards work on the rear, and then we're going to try our brake lights, which is going to engage the rear brake light right there, as you can see when I press the front brake. So that's good. And then you also have to make sure that it engages with the rear brake right here. So that's good. All our lights look good. Yeah. Next, we're going to check for suspension leaks. This is really important because suspension leaks happen and they can cause massive issues with the braking system, as well as just dampening problems and just the way the bike handles in general. Suspension is very important. So, as you can see right here, we have our forks. These are fork covers. Usually you can just stick a finger under here and just pull them up, and you will see the seals. This has no leaking, there's no residue. right here, as well as up on top of here. So this fork seems fine. Usually upside down forks where the fluid is at the bottom and the rod right here is at the top tend to not leak, like BMW bikes and stuff like that. But other bikes, such as, let's say this dirt bike over here, these fork seals tend to leak a very good amount. See, this is a leaky fork seal right here. This is Jeremy's bike, the 250. That is all fork fluid and buildup. He needs to have his fork seals replaced. Fork seals and dust seals. So, we are gonna check the other one on the left side. We'll rotate the bike over this way so we can get a better view. Stick a finger in here. Looks good, no residue. So these forks are good. Then we're gonna check the rear suspension as well, see if we see anything wrong or iffy. No leaks inside of here, this looks good, no cracks. All this, everything looks structurally sound. And I don't believe there's a center shock, I think it's just that. Oh, that's interesting.
There's two.
Oh, there's two on the other side. Sweet. Yeah, so these look good. So all the suspension on this bike seems to be up to par. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you have fork fluid dripping onto your brake calipers, it'll soak into your brake pads and it'll cause you to not be able to stop. You will have no friction whatsoever to cause you to stop. So, come take a look over here. This is Jeremy's bike, and it previously had soaked brake pads because of the fact that the fork seals were blown. As you can see, all this nasty fork fluid buildup around there, and it got all the way onto the caliper, inside the caliper, in the pistons inside of the caliper, as well as on the brake pads, and that caused this bike to not be able to stop. There was no friction. It was just, and the brake pads look totally normal. You just have to make sure that they're not wet. They need to be completely dry. Next, we're checking the air filter. Usually with air filters, they can be in a few different spots. It can be under a gas tank if you're working on a BMW. It could be in this general area if you're working on a dirt bike. This little 85, the air filter is back there, as well as on this 250, the air filter is back here and back here. On Harleys, it'll be on the side. It'll be that silver thing on the side. You know, you can check this out right here. This is the air filter. Right here. And usually I always like to tell the customer, if you're getting your bike in here and you're doing general maintenance, always good to clean your air filter. You know, you want your bike breathing properly. It takes a little time. It doesn't cost a lot. You might as well do it. You know what I'm saying? So, check it on here. We're gonna have to remove, I believe, out of these side panels, because this is the throttle body. The throttle body has to breathe somehow. So I believe the air filter is gonna be in here, but we're just gonna take it out, spray some compressed air inside of the air box, and make sure that the air filter itself is clean. It doesn't have any buildup. There's no grease on it, unless if it's oil, proper oil grease for a dirt bike, which you can use, and that is this. Filter oil. Whenever you clean a filter, you always put filter oil on it. Yes, that stuff too. Oh, fuck. Don't get this shit on your hands, what I'm doing right now, because it does not come off. It is disgusting. It is hella sticky. You want to be wearing gloves. Trust me. And yeah, always make sure that your air filter is dry too before putting it back in, because you do not want to be sucking air or water in. But yeah, that's how you check and maintain your air filter. All right, now that the air filter has been cleaned, we are gonna go ahead and check our levers, fluids, and we're gonna add our lube in places that we need it.
All right.
Next, let's check these levers. First, we have our front brake lever. We want it to be tight, not too tight, but you want it tight. Next, we're checking the levers. Let's start with the front brake right here. This one's feeling a little bit spongy. Two causes of that are air in the lines, as well as this old brake fluid right here. Brake fluid should not be anywhere close to as dark as that. It should be the color of vegetable oil, all right? So we're gonna go ahead and recommend a brake flush, as well as a brake bleed to fix the spongy brake, as well as all this nasty oil in this reservoir. Next, we're going to go ahead and check the rear brake line. This will always be on the right side. You just want to give it a nice step down. It shouldn't feel too spongy. Just a little bit of play like this is good. It's always good to check what the oil looks like inside of the rear reservoir. It's the same kind of rules as in the front. If it's dark, replace it, flush it, bleed it. Simple as that. Lastly, we have cables. We are going to check the health of all the cables around here. We're going to start off with the brake lines. All these look good. There's no cracking, no leaking, everything looks healthy. Over here on the clutch line, everything looks fine, no cracking. We're going to pull it out and we're going to see if there's any fraying inside of here. If you see any sort of fraying in there, immediate sign that you should immediately replace those cables, because that will snap and you will be stuck with no clutch. Another line that I can check is the rear brake line, which is on this side. That looks good. Yeah, that looks fine. No leaking, no cracks. All this looks fine. No stress marks over there. And follow it back as much as we can. Everything looks fine. Also, I kind of like to take a little quick look if the seat's already off, just on all these wires down here. Can't hurt, you know what I'm saying? Also, another thing I like to take a look at is the spark plug wiring. Sometimes that tends to crack. You can't really see it too much right here, but this looks fairly healthy. It's a newer bike, so it's not something really to be worried about. Next, we're going to follow the front brake. We're going to follow these lines down here. As you can see, it splits off because this bike has ABS, I'm assuming, so there's probably an ABS pump in there. But it splits off, comes down here. This looks fine, feels fine. No leaking, no cracks, no stress marks. Looks good. And next, we are going to check our fluid levels. So first thing is obviously brake, front and rear. We've already done that. Now we're going to check the coolant, which is right down here. The coolant fill port should be right there. It should be topped off. Once you remove this tank and you remove the cap to it, the fluid should be at the top. If you are seeing kind of like a wavy pattern of metal inside there, that means that the fluid is not topped off and you need to top it off. If you do try and top it off, you need to know what coolant was in there previously, because if you mix certain types of coolant together, it will create a gel-like paste, and that gel-like paste will catch in your water pump and it will cause it to seize up. So make sure that you are either flushing the entire system and putting our coolant into it, or you have to ask the owner what was previously put in it so that you don't mix Motorrad in it and create a gel-like form and destroy the entire pump system.
Yeah, and look at a service manual for your ethylene or propylene glycol substitute.
Exactly. And then lastly, we are going to be doing a road test. Unfortunately, we can't do a road test on this bike because it doesn't run yet since the battery is fried. But what you are looking for is a bike that runs healthy, it doesn't sputter, it doesn't die out, it gives the proper amount of power when you give it full throttle. It sounds okay, it's not knocking, the valves don't sound too bad. You also want to make sure that the steering is good. The steering head bearings, they can't lock into tiny little places, you know what I'm saying? You have to be able to freely move the handlebar. You also want to check that the suspension is good, so I like to hit the front brake and kind of just give it a little push down, see if any leaking happens from that, see if it rebounds correctly as well as compresses correctly. And yeah, I just have to give every single brake a hard press, and that will tell me if all the braking system's correct. And I like to just kind of use all of these buttons as well, just to make sure that everything is in a working condition, as well as check your speedometer and your odometer. Sometimes those go out as well, so I recommend always keeping an eye on here to see if everything is working correctly on the dash. Now that we have our entire general inspection sheet written up, we're going to go ahead and give the customer a call, and we are going to tell him what concerns we found with the bike, and we are going to fill him in on what looked good on the bike. So in this case scenario, we are going to definitely recommend the brake flush as well as the brake bleed. We are definitely going to recommend the chain replacement and chain tensioning as well. And I believe that was all the stuff that really caught my attention. There was a few things that I'm definitely going to write down, such as brake pads in the front. I'm going to recommend that he replaces those after this season, as well as the front tire. I recommend that he replaces it after this season as well. Everything else looked good. We already talked about the battery, and he knows that we're ordering a new one. And Santino, what do you have to say?
The oil change.
The oil change, yes. We are definitely going to be doing an oil change for sure. I believe that is already on the tag, so we're going to knock that out. But yeah, we're going to fill them in and make sure that you have either a text with verbal confirmation of him saying yes, go ahead and do it, or if you get it over the phone call, make sure that you have like that he knows exactly what's happening and how much it's going to cost. And you don't want to leave the customer in the dark. You have to tell him exactly what's happening. We are their friends, we're not their enemies. So yeah, just proper communication is key for sure. But this front brake is
I'm just gonna get you on a swivel.
Next, we're checking the front brake. Right here.
God damn it.
Alright, let's do that shit again.